Viewpoint.
Money FM 89.3. Now, earlier this week, Singapore's Minister for Law and Home Affairs, Mr. K. Shanmugam, announced that Singaporean authorities had charged 3 individuals for fraud by false representation in connection with the export of servers containing advanced Nvidia computer chips. The fraud charges highlight how individuals allegedly misrepresented the final destination of US-manufactured servers containing the Nvidia chips. So, the servers were shipped from Singapore to Malaysia, and investigators are now determining whether Malaysia was the final destination or merely a transit point. Alarms were raised when further probing by authorities revealed the final destinations were shrouded in mystery, hinting there could be potential breaches of US export controls. And of course, there are more complications brought on by strategic efforts from the US to control and restrict AI chips exports to China, which are part of its broader aim to maintain technological advantage and address security vulnerabilities. But bringing this closer to home, we want to talk about NationGate. It's a Penang-based electronics manufacturing service provider which is finding itself caught in the fallout of Singapore's investigation into the alleged fraudulent transfer of Nvidia's advanced AI chips. Things have been pretty dramatic in the last couple of days. NationGate's shares crashed nearly 30% on Monday before trading was halted for an hour yesterday. So what are some of the latest reactions out of Malaysia? How will this impact Malaysia's burgeoning data center industry? For more, let's speak with the Straits Times' Malaysia Bureau Chief, Shannon Teoh. Shannon, great to have you on the show to weigh in on this.
It's glad to be back, although the circumstances are a bit controversial, I suppose, yeah.
Yes, I mean, it is a very interesting case. It has spotlighted significant issues within the global supply chain involving 3 men charged with fraud over Nvidia AI chips. And it's particularly intriguing because it also intersects with critical international trade and national security concerns. So what's the general sentiment towards this AI chip saga where you are?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern in the market. People are wondering which companies are exposed, which companies are not exposed. I think there's talk of a lot of funds wanting to get out for now because it's just building on the uncertainty, right? There's all this stuff about tariffs from the US, any kind of other kind of trade measures, and these export controls and the growing storyline about AI chips going to where they are not supposed to go. People are already very jittery. This is adding to the jitters. But that said, we talked about NationGate. Mm-hmm. NationGate is saying that they're not exposed, that none of these companies mention the companies which are linked to the 3 persons or the 1 person specifically, the companies that he has, the cloud companies. But they're saying that we don't do business with them, so there shouldn't really be an issue here. Mm. So the part of it is concern. The other part of it is who and which companies in Malaysia are actually exposed. So what we're seeing now in the market is a lot of knee-jerk, but we may need some time, a few days, maybe next week before people in the know, people in the industry, and also the investors truly have all the information that they need.
But currently, what are you hearing from your industry sources?
They don't feel like this is... Look, I mean, the whole storyline about chip smuggling is something that's coming out from, as you mentioned, this whole storyline about the US wanting to have, to maintain technological advantages and so on and so forth. But the players down here actually involved in AI in that level of data centers don't seem to be too concerned. They believe that the key thing about data centers and about AI and all that stuff is latency, right? Mm-hmm. There are strategic positions around the world where you need the data centers to be. That's the overriding concerns above the national security concerns. So they don't believe that countries like basically Malaysia, like Singapore, will be hard hit by this kind of controls. There will be space for negotiation. Mm-hmm. There's always talk about tier 1, tier 2 countries, so on and so forth, the various ways in which the US could apply sanctions. I think at the end of the day, it is what is most advantageous to the US as well. Now that on the one hand, the kind of more political narrative about whether the US is getting a fair deal out of its trade deals and with its trading partners. But I think on top of that, if you want to look at why these data centers are where they are, so you kind of really run away from that reality. There may be stricter rules about how chips are shipped out, labeling and all this sort of regulations, but I think the existing bona fide players are ready to pay ball on that because they do want the chips, they do want to use them.
And understandably, people are concerned. I know that Malaysian authorities are investigating the matter and are in discussion with data center firms. What else are you hearing from officials in Malaysia? Are there laws that have been breached?
Well, nobody really knows. I think the sense here is that, look, supply chains aren't so straightforward. Things move and things have to move fast. That's pretty much kind of like the economic imperative, right? Authorities and forces, which are usually customs officers, a lot of the checks are random checks or based on tip-offs. In case of the Singaporean investigation, it was based on a tip-off, right? You don't really go around checking every container, querying everything. That said, yeah, there's a lot of mislabeling that's going around. I'm not sure if you've heard of how Malaysia has been exporting rare earth, sometimes at play, to get around kind of export controls as well. So that stuff happens. It needs to be clamped down on. Malaysia has an issue with electronic waste coming in as well. Not all of it is detected. So that kind of stuff is part and parcel of having an open economy, very open kind of import-export rules. That's not to say that these things are okay, right? We have to kind of figure out a way to stop that. But the point is that at this point, none of the authorities were actually aware of any specific wrongdoing. They know that there's concern, especially from the US, about whether Malaysia is being used as a transit point. But if you're looking at this specific case alone, at the point where Singapore announced the probe or gave out details a couple of days ago, Malaysia at that time probably had not started any serious investigations into it. They're probably just beginning to look at what the shipments were and where the chips and the servers were going. And that's why the minister said, well, we're checking now with the data center players. Do you have all the chips that you say you are supposed to be using? So that process has only just started.
I see. And, it does seem like there are possible ways restricted technology can flow out, given that these Nvidia chips in question are at least $30,000 each. Right. So what legal case do you think the US might have in this?
Look, I mean, these are very prized chips, and we know that. Of course, there are players in China that want that. Now, how it can kind of move across from Malaysia to China is pretty straightforward. It doesn't really have to go through a lot of many different intermediaries, right? You can. I suppose one of the things that people talk about is, you say you need 10 chips, you order 15, you keep 10 for yourself, and then you sell on the other 5 to a Chinese company. You can fudge around all the invoicing. You can fudge around the labeling on when you send it out and kind of fool customs. So I don't think it's too difficult to do. It's only when people start focusing on this particular transactions and how they are done, and then that's when the heat comes in, right? So I think that all this narrative about chip smuggling and people clamping down on it is going to slow it down. That is definitely going to happen. Is it going to be able to eradicate the whole thing altogether? I'm not sure, because like you mentioned, it is pretty lucrative, and what we're told is that the price on the street in China is above the retail price, right? They're willing to pay over the odds. So why wouldn't some companies, try to take advantage of this? I mean, if it's a quick buck, you don't even have to operate anything, you just buy and sell on. Right? So that's the carrot, I suppose.
Okay. So where do we go from here? Where does the investigation go from here? And what are the possible next steps?
Well, I think Malaysia's taking it seriously. At least the customs and the police are involved. Again, tracking down exactly which are the shipments. I think that's a conversation that's not in public domain. But I think we're going to see over the next few weeks, especially with this. So I think at the end of the day, neither Malaysia nor Singapore, any of the countries want to be in the US bad books. I think there's going to be a kind of a very strong show, not just a show, there's obviously action involved, of wanting to be very serious about this, understanding the US concerns, and finding out how we can best kind of adhere to the guidelines and regulations. Look, Malaysia's the US might be the biggest market for our semiconductor right now, and all this is going to be related, right? So if you don't play ball, then everyone's trying to avoid the Trump tariffs, as it were. Playing ball on the export controls is going to be helpful if you want to, avoid being one of the hardest hit in terms of trade measures. So I think there is a significant incentive for Malaysia to be serious about enforcing those export controls. Even though I think the messaging from Malaysia, I think Singapore as well, is that we don't recognize unilateral trade controls, but there is an incentive here to kind of abide by what the US wants with regards to especially the Nvidia chips.
Well, so much happening in this space. Shannon, I have a very strong feeling I'm going to be speaking with you sooner rather than later. Thank you for your insights and perspectives as always. The Straits Times Malaysia Bureau Chief, Shannon Teoh.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.